All right, today we're wrapping up the last of our, what we can lump together as the category circle of fifths sequences. That includes both our falling fifths from the other day with the, the fourth up, fifth down, or fifth down, fourth up, our falling fifth sequence. It includes our third down step up sequence, the Fonte sequence we talked about most recently. And it includes the tide bass sequence. And to construct the tide bass sequence, which is what our focus of today, we're going to go back to some two voice writing, then expand it out through three voice writing, and then go into the full four voice harmonic texture that we've been focusing on in this unit. So let's go to the whiteboard, and let's start off by just sketching out two voices, just moving nicely in parallel thirds, because everybody loves parallel thirds. That was like the first thing we did when we were writing multiple voices of music together. So I'll just have one voice, walk down. I'll go C, I'll go down B, A, G, F, E. Let's go all the way down the scale, just parallel thirds down the scale. C, B, A, G, F, E, D, C. Lovely. And then if I'm just doing parallel thirds, of course, I'd go E, and then D, and then C, B, A, G, F, back to E. And here I've got parallel thirds going all the way down the scale. Lovely texture for two voices. Parallel thirds just sounds fantastic. There's so much music with parallel thirds in it. Now, we talked about changing this from parallel thirds into what we called the 2-3 suspension, or the bass suspension. And we do this by hanging onto my bass notes too long. In fact, let's just maybe shift them over a little bit here. That will make our life easier. Use the mouse to do that. And so I'm just going to shift them over here. So you can see now that each of our bass notes has been offset. Like that. And then to create the suspension, what we're going to do is we're going to hold on to the previous note. Like that. Like that. Just do that little tie over into a dissonance. Tie, and then resolve. And now you see that when the C and the D hit, we've got a 2 in the bass. It's a dissonance. It resolves to our 3. We've got a 2 resolves to a 3. A 2 resolves to a 3. 2 resolves to a 3. 2 resolves to 3. 2 resolves to 3. And 2 resolves to 3. And I've got these lovely 2-3 suspensions all the way down. So crunchy, so dissonant. Even if we have more than an octave between these voices, they're not right next to each other on the piano, we've got space between them. I'm still going to refer to this as a 2-3 suspension instead of a 9-10 suspension, because I like to use 2 to refer to the fact that it's the bass note that is the dissonance and has to resolve to the third, versus if the top note were the dissonance and resolved down. For example, if I had not this, but I had this C in the bass and I had a D up top, and I resolved the D down to the octave, this I would refer to as a 9-8 suspension. And so I like to use 2 to refer to the fact that the bass is the dissonance. 9 refers to the fact that the top voice is the dissonance and has to resolve. It just helps me keep track of which voice is going to move. All right, as we went into a 3-voice texture, we learned that this new tied bass, and you can see that the bass ties and becomes a dissonance each time. So we refer to this as a tied bass phenomenon. We learned that a nice way of harmonizing that was to put a 4th above the bass. That would resolve out to a 6th. So, above my 4th, above my C here, going to go up 4, C, D, E, F. And I'm going to resolve that out to a sixth above my B. And then I'm going to go fourth. So up a fourth from B is E. Resolve that out into the sixth. Let's pause a moment. Let's just erase the board. Let's see. Why am I resolving out to a sixth each time? Why the sixth? It's a good question, and one that I shouldn't just gloss over and make assumptions. So let's erase a little bit here and just clear some stuff up here. We're going to get rid of all our tied base and all of this sixth stuff. So we're just going to go back. Just going to go back to our descending octave in the bass. We did our 2 3s. We're going to do something new now. So C. I'm going to leave room for my bass to go in the future. So I'm going to think of leaving a space there. A, G, F, E, D, C. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do just the very most basic form of moving down imaginable. And that is, we know that, if I'm coming down an octave, a scale, 5-3, 5-3, it works very nicely to do this four-bourdon motion, where everything just moves down, and we have the chord of motion, the chord of sixths, moving down in parallel with my voice there. So I've got my thirds here. I still have my parallel thirds coming down. Where am I at? I skipped something. C, B, A, G, E, D. Oh, E, D, C. I turned that C into a G. E, D, C, B, A, G, F, E. There's my parallel thirds. But now above that, I'm going to have sixths moving. And that's my four-bourdon texture. So come here with a G. We'll start on a G there. G, G, F, E, D, C, T. Would like to resolve back to Do. And I'm going to break it at the end to go to that Do there. Ti, Do, Fa, Mi, Re, Do. Ah, it's our Zans ending. This is a tenore Zans cadence at the end. Now, what we can do is we can decorate this parallel 6-3 structure. And we can expand upon it by tying the bass over and making some dissonances here. So I'm going to tie that bass over. And you remember that I could create this bass suspension. And I'm going to do my, my parallel thirds coming down here. I'm going to repeat each of those. And we're going to just tie my bass. So I got this 2, there's the 2-3 suspension. 2-3. We're going to tie my B across the measure and go 2-3. Put some bar lines in here so you can see the measures. So you can see that I'm tying my bass across the measures. And maybe at the end we'll just resolve to the 5-3 instead of doing the 2-3 suspension there. We'll just resolve into the cadence. C, E, and C. Ending on a nice 5-3. It's like a Do 5-3. All right, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tie my bass across the measure each time and create that 2-3 suspension. Tie that bass. Create the 2-3 suspension. Tie the bass. Create a 2-3 suspension, tie the bass, create a 2-3 suspension. I might stop there. We'll see. When I get to 4 voices, I might change things up in that texture. All right, so now I've got this nice motion coming down here with these 2-3 suspensions. Well, if I held the G here, the C and the G would be too strong. That fifth is a super strong. It would really stabilize that bass, and it would make the D sound like it was wrong, and the D had to resolve to an E or to a C. So if I put a fifth in here, it's going to be too strong, and it's going to sound more like a 9/8 suspension happening above this. So I can't use a fifth. If I put the sixth here, we're going to start hearing other things. What we're going to do is I'm going to put that fourth in here. That fourth. So that I have these lovely thirds between my upper voices, and that will provide this stability here. That makes the bass dissonant. D and F are consonants. The C is dissonant, so that makes it resolve down. But as I do, I'm going to come back to my structural 6/3 chords here. This is my structure. This is a decoration that resolves to that structure. Like this. So there's my fourth. It's going to step out. My B up a fourth. E. There's my third. It's going to step out into the sixth. Here's my fourth. My third between these voices steps out into the sixth. And you can see that this actually creates a sequence: up a step, down a third, up a step, down a third, up a step, down a third. We see that line so often in music, that up a step, down a third line. Up a step, skip down, make our third, and skip up la, ti, do at the end. So this is a lovely structure. And like I said, it's all of these 4/2s. All these lovely 4/2s resolving into 6/3s, and the 4/2 is a way of decorating the 6/3 in a 3-voice structure. Last thing we're going to do is we're going to fill in the texture a little bit, and we're going to add some lovely little 4-voice textures. 4-voice textures here. So we're going to add in, what we're going to do here is I'm going to turn it into a 6/4/2 chord. The 4/2 I've talked about is short for 6/4/2. Where have we seen that before? On a Fa resolving down to a Mi 6/3. In the rule of the octave, we had the 6/4/2. Well, it turns out that we can do this lovely chain of 6/4/2 chords. And each of the 6/4/2 chords decorates the 6/3 that it resolves to. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's add a 6 above my C. There's going to be an A. You see how nice and stable this is in our top voice now? As I have this DFA, I've got a triad up here. Each of these is going to form a triad, and therefore be super nice and stable. ACE, GBD, FA, C. You see I've got all these triads of stability up top. And the triad with the bass, a step underneath the root of the triad there, forms this 6/4/2 chord. And it's an instability, and that forces the bass to resolve down. Now as that does that, we're going to resolve things up. And what we're going to do is we're going to write these parallel thirds between our upper voices. So I could do parallel thirds, or I could do contrary motion. It works either way. Because this A could step down to a G, or it could step up to the B. And it depends whether you want to double the G, double that note of this, or whether you want to double the bass note, the B. Either of those works nicely as a double. So the G can go to the A, or it can double the F. The F can step up to the G. That gives these nice parallel thirds, or 6 between these voices. The E can step up to the F. The D can step up to the E there. This one, I would definitely not double the B. I would definitely not double that B coming down, because I don't want to go Do T and have two voices stuck on a T, La T and Do T, because that T is going to want to resolve to Do. That's a super strong resolution. I would never want to double that note. What I would instead is go up to the C to the D, and that gives me Do, Re, and then of course Do, Re, we'd probably want to go to Mi, so we don't. This is why we don't usually carry this sequence all the way down to the C5/3. As you can see, that Do, Re wants to resolve to Do, but there'd be a Re, Do, parallel thirds with the bass, or parallel octaves with the bass. Or if we went Do, Ti, Do, it'd be parallel octaves up top. So what we usually do is we usually break out of this sequence. We usually break out of this sequence. We don't carry it all the way down to the Do. And a good place to break out is in the Fa Mi, because now we're into rule of the octave. And then we can make it stick, you know, do our nice Ray 6-4-3, going to our Do 5-3. All right, let's write a Ray 6-4-3. So my bass coming down, Mi, Re, Do, Sol, Fa, Mi, and, or even better here, better voice leading. Let's keep on that Sol and go Sol, Sol, Sol. There's my boring altozons going right across there. And then we'll go Ti, Do. Maybe make this a 7/6 suspension above it. That'd be fun. Ti, Do, Do, Ti, Do. And then if I went up here, D, E, which is Re, Mi, Fa, Mi. And give this nice Mi, Fa, Mi. Our nice little altizons there, Fa, Mi, the interesting one. So that breaking into that Ray 6-4-3, maybe decorated with a 7/6 suspension right there, 7/6, C, B, C. It's a great way to end this sequence. But in the meantime, what we've got is these lovely 6-4-2s, and they resolve down to 6-3s. I like to do this in this way. I think this is the more interesting way to do this, is with the parallel thirds. FA stepping up to GB, then both of them drop down a third and up a step. So in two voices, they're doing these parallel things. And of course, we start out off probably C, starting the down a third, up a step, down a third, up a step, down a third, up a step motion. Would sound absolutely fantastic there. I could even start this off, if I wanted to have both voices going the down a third, up a step, we could do this 5/6 motion. G, A, up a step, down a third, up a step, down a third, up a step, down a third. And you see that motion of the up a step, down a third just ties into this. Sounds absolutely fantastic. We've seen that motion in all of these circle of fifths sequences. Circle of fifths because Rameau would view these as having roots of chords that show the falling fifth sequence. He would say that this was a D chord going to a G chord, going to a C chord, going to an F chord, and just based on the notes there and stacking them in thirds. I like to think of them as separate sequences. It helps me remember what they're doing. So, recap on our tied bass. When we tie the bass across and it becomes a dissonance, we put a 6-4-2 on it. That 6-4-2, the bass is going to go down by step into a 6-3 chord. Above that, what's going to happen is I'm going to have one of the voices, the voice that forms the 2 with the bass stays the same and becomes a 3. 2-3 becomes the same. So let's say I'm writing, I have a G here, I tied it across to become a G, I'm resolving it down to become an F. I would have a 2 here, and the 2 stays the same. I would have a 4 here, and the 4 is going to move up by step to become a 6, like that. So up a 4th from G would be a C, and it would step up to the 6 above the F, just like that. And then I would have a 6th stepping up into an octave. So G up at 6 is an E, and that would step up into my octave F. Or, you know, depending on how you have things, you might want to have that E go down to the D, which would give parallel 6 with the bass. This is another possibility. Say I have this voice down here underneath. It could go down E to D like that, and that would sound just as fine. Doesn't matter whether you double the F or whether you double the D in that chord. Both of those voices are fine. So, recap, 2 stays, becomes 3. The 4th, up by step to become a 6th. And either the 6th can go up by step to become the octave, or it can go down by step to be a parallel 6th with the bass. And that's how you write your 6-4-2 tied bass, resolving to our 6-3 sequence. And you can just chain them together by doing 6-4-2, 6-4-2 over and over. Just splash down into the next section, and there's the 6-4-2 sequence.